the day the US dollar stopped being real money. On August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon sat down in front of a television camera and said 11 words that changed every wallet on earth. Most people watching that night thought he was talking about Vietnam. He wasn't. He was cutting the last thread connecting your money to anything real. And he called it temporary. It was not temporary. That one Sunday night announcement quietly ended 10,000 years of money meaning something physical. Something you could hold. Something a government could not simply invent. And almost nobody noticed. Because Nixon buried it between a wage freeze and a trade policy nobody understood. This is the story of how that happened. How the most powerful currency in human history quietly became a promise backed by nothing. And what that actually costs you every single year. But to understand what Nixon killed, you have to understand what he killed it with. Go back to 1944. The Second World War is almost over. 44 countries send delegates to a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The world's financial system had just been shattered by a depression and 2 wars. Nobody trusted anybody's money anymore. So they built a new system around one assumption. America had gold. More gold than anyone. Nearly 70% of the world's monetary gold reserves sat inside Fort Knox. So the deal was simple. Every country pegged their currency to the US dollar. And the US dollar was pegged to gold. $35, 1 ounce. Always. You could walk into any American bank, hand them dollars, and they were legally required to hand you gold back. For about 25 years, it worked. Then America started spending money it didn't have. The 1960s hit hard. Vietnam was burning through billions. Lyndon Johnson was simultaneously building his Great Society, new hospitals, new housing programs, new welfare systems. Guns and butter, his advisors called it. You could have both. You cannot have both. By the late 1960s, the United States was printing dollars faster than its gold could cover. More dollars existed in the world than America had gold to back them. The promise was already broken. Most people just didn't know it yet. France knew. Charles de Gaulle had been watching the numbers. In 1965, he stood in front of cameras and said the system was unfair. America could print dollars and buy European goods and companies with paper they simply created. France began converting its dollar reserves into gold. Physically. Ships carrying gold back across the Atlantic. Other countries noticed. They started doing the same thing. The gold was leaving Fort Knox faster than anyone had prepared for. From 1959 to 1971, U.S. gold reserves dropped by more than half. The vault was draining. And the world was starting to do the math. Nixon had 3 options. He could cut spending. He could raise taxes. Or he could end the promise entirely. He ended the promise. August 15, 1971. A Sunday night, deliberately chosen. Markets were closed. The world couldn't react until Monday morning. Nixon announced the dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. Temporarily, he said. Just to stabilize things. Just until the pressure passed. The pressure never passed. Within 2 years, the major world currencies had abandoned fixed exchange rates entirely. The Bretton Woods system was dead. And for the first time in recorded history, the world's reserve currency was backed by nothing except the word of the government that printed it. Economists had a name for this. Fiat money. From the Latin. Let it be done. It is worth sitting with what that actually means. The dollar in your pocket is not a claim on gold. It is not a claim on silver. It is not a claim on any physical thing that exists anywhere on earth. It is worth something because the government says it is worth something. And because everyone around you agrees to keep believing that. That is the entire foundation. And once money is no longer chained to anything real, the temptation arrives immediately. If you can create money with a keystroke, why wouldn't you? The federal government spent $4.4 trillion more than it collected between 1971 and 2000. Let the Federal Reserve buy them if nobody else will. The number on your dollar never changed. It still says $1. It will always say $1. But what $1 buys has been collapsing for 50 years. In 1971, a dollar bought roughly what $4 buys today. The average American house cost $25,000. A year of college tuition at a public university was under $500. A new car averaged $3,500. None of those prices exist anymore. The number on your paycheck got bigger. Everything you need got bigger faster. That gap is not an accident. That gap is the cost of August 15, 1971. In 2008, the system showed its full shape for the first time. Banks had spent years packaging terrible loans into products they labeled safe. Then they sold those products to each other, then bet on them, then built towers of debt on top of those bets. When the housing market cracked, the whole structure came down in weeks. Lehman Brothers collapsed on a Monday. By Thursday, the global financial system was hours from freezing entirely. The Federal Reserve's response revealed everything. They created, from nothing, trillions of dollars. Not printed physically. In 2 years, the Federal Reserve created more new dollars than had been created in the entire prior history of the United States. The inflation that followed was not a mystery. It was arithmetic. Here is what nobody in 1971 said out loud. When a government can create money without limit, it never has to make hard choices. It never has to tell voters the war costs too much. It never has to explain why the programs don't add up. It just creates more dollars and lets the cost dissolve invisibly into everyone's savings. It is the quietest tax ever invented. It leaves no bill. It sends no notice. It just slowly makes everything you already own worth a little less. Every year. Without asking. The people who benefit are the ones who borrow large and early, before the inflation arrives. Governments. Large corporations. Anyone who took out a loan in 1971 and paid it back in cheaper $1,985. The people who lose are the ones who saved. The ones who did what they were told. Put money in the bank, let it sit, trust the system. Their discipline was punished by the same system that rewarded the recklessness. Nixon called it temporary. 53 years later, there is no serious conversation in Washington about returning to any kind of anchor. The dollar is what it is. A promise. A shared agreement. A number that means whatever the institution behind it can convince you it means. And the institution has never once, in 53 years, chosen to make your dollar worth more. That is not a coincidence. That is the system working exactly as it was designed to work on that Sunday night in August. In a television address most people have forgotten. When 11 words ended something that had held for 10,000 years. And nobody stopped to ask if you wanted that. You still haven't been asked.